is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer live on a Sunday in November. As Jonas takes a big old mouthful of pizza, post-game pizza, but it won't taste like it would after a victory because the Ravens come out on the wrong end of an 18-16 tough, grinded out, hard-nosed AFC North win in the trenches loss. It was a battle between the Ravens and the Steelers in the first matchup of these two divisional rivals. We'll break down the game, and we'll talk about whether the division is wrapped up, whether the Ravens can climb out of the hole that they've built for themselves. But first, the Banner Ravens podcast is brought to you by Toyota. Toyota has been building a legacy of excellence for years, from developing hybrid technology to upping the standards of safety and efficiency. Toyota is always innovating, always making progress, and with a superior lineup of in-stock SUVs, including the adventure-ready RAV4 and capable, affordable Corolla Cross, you can experience the legacy of Toyota for yourself. Visit buyatoyota.com, the official website for deals, to find out more. Toyota, let's go places. Jonas, what is your word of the day today?
It's got to be kryptonite. I'm not much of a comic book guy. What am I talking about? I'm not here, Justin Tucker, missing easy words. A substance that causes Superman to become weak when he is exposed to it. And I don't know if you want to apply this definition to the Steelers being the Ravens' kryptonite, or the Steelers being Lamar's kryptonite, or door A and door B. It's just, when we were talking about this game, how everything seems to go wrong for the Ravens in the most outrageous ways possible. And you had that today, despite the defense having probably its best game of the season. We aren't really sure what to make of. You could argue. I guess I would say the Bills game was also a probably more all-around effort, considering we're not really sure how legit this Steelers defense is. But they held. This was the lowest passer rating allowed in a game this season by the Ravens. It was the lowest yards per attempt allowed in a game by the Ravens this season. And here they are, having lost a fourth straight game to the Steelers, and Lamar is now 1-4 against them as a starter, and they're now 1.5 games back in the division. It's not a death sentence for their division title hopes. As we talked about on Thursday's pod, I think the Ravens' schedule is more favorable than the Steelers. They also get the chance to get them at home near the end of the season. I think, the New York Times playoff odds, which are obviously an evolving model, had them at just under 50% chances of winning that division and getting a top 4 seed. But 4 losses this year for a team that people were talking about as being potentially the best in the AFC, I guess, after the Chiefs. And here they stand, second place in their own division after another tsunami of suck. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, 4 straight losses to the Steelers, and it seems like we've been seeing the same game on replay, with the exception of maybe that Week 18 game last year, because that didn't count for the Ravens, and nobody was really paying attention to that slop fest. But just feels like the same darn game that we are watching over and over again between these two teams. The 17-10 losses last year, a pair of them to the Steelers. And then to 2022, it was a 16-13 loss and a 16-14 win. So it's these low scoring, high stakes, grind them out games between these two teams where you win in the trenches, and it feels like you can throw every cliche at the book at it. But it was a similar story to what we saw the last time these two teams met in Pittsburgh too. The last game where these two teams met in a game that actually mattered, which was in the middle of last year in Pittsburgh, and the Ravens lost that game 17-10. And it was dropped passes that killed the Ravens in that game. They shot themselves in the foot. And again, today, there was one big drop by Zay Flowers, but it wasn't as much the drop passes. It was the 2 lost fumbles, the interception that wasn't really on Lamar, that could have been called a fumble if you wanted to call it that, 2 missed field goals, and 12 penalties. I don't know what it is about this rivalry, but the Steelers always bring out the worst in the Ravens. No matter how these two teams come into this matchup, no matter what their records are, Mike Tomlin brings out his A game when facing John Harbaugh. And it's a frustrating momentum halter in the middle of this season where they could have used another divisional win.
Yeah, if this hasn't already gone viral on Ravens Twitter, I'm sure it will at some point tonight. But after that game in Pittsburgh last year, Steelers reporters were talking to. Actually, no, it wasn't. It wasn't with Steelers. It wasn't local media. It was Patrick Peterson, then of Pittsburgh, went on his podcast and said, "I'll never forget on Wednesday meeting. So the few days before they actually played the Ravens, Coach Mike Tomlin said, when it's a dying moment, they will try to burn the house down." And that is something that I know was applied to John Harbaugh in pretty much every game where it seems like there was some coaching malpractice. I don't know how much malpractice you can ascribe to him when it's not him fumbling the ball in completely inopportune moments. It's not him, sending the GOAT kicker out to try makeable long field goals and him missing it. It's not him, telling Justice Hill to have, to give away a completion down the left sideline for an incredible interception. Not to say that John is not faultless in all this, but it just seems, as you were saying, Paul, like there is very little poise with this group. There's very little composure with this group, even when they march down the field on the drive that they have to go and get a would-be tying touchdown and 2-point conversion. They seem to get rattled before the snap on that 2-point conversion. I mean, maybe rattle is not the right word, but Nelson Aguilar is like looking back at Lamar, and he's a half step slow. He's the one responsible for that crack block that has to set the edge, and he misses on the block or he's late to the block, and that the Steelers linebacker just comes in and blows things up. You had Tyler Linderbaum and Patrick McCary turning and burning to get down to that side, and had they been able to have that clear path, I think Lamar probably would have walked in. But it's just one small thing. I mean, it's like everything that we've talked about with the Ravens defense, saying why things have gone poorly for them. It's like 10 of 11 guys might be doing the right job, but it's the 11th guy who screws up, and it's the 11th guy who gets picked on. And I felt like time and time again today, it was, for the most part, a lot of guys doing their job right, but one guy gets flagged, or one guy drops a pass, or one guy, Lamar, overthrows a receiver on a 20-yard, catch possibility. So that they were this not experienced, that they were this out of character coming out of the mini bye with good health. It's really disappointing. I think if you're John Harbaugh, if you're Lamar, if you're anyone in this Ravens rivalry who has not really had the chance to taste victory in this series.
Yeah, let's go back to that 2-point conversion attempt, because the Ravens still, for all of the bad football that they played this afternoon, had a chance to tie it up in the last minute of play. They come 69 yards down the field in 2 minutes and 29 seconds. They score a touchdown. They then go for 2 in order to tie it at 18. And you talked to Lamar Jackson after the game, who said it was a designed quarterback run. That was also the second play that they called, because they called one play, and right before the snap, Mike Tomlin called a timeout, so they had to scrap that play. Derrick Henry was not on the field for the second attempt, the attempt that they actually made there. What did you think of that play call with the game on the line?
I'm in favor of getting the ball in the hands of your best player. It worked on the 2-pointer against Cincinnati last Thursday, where you have the arc block from Mark Andrews leading the way. Similar kind of action with a different blocking formation. I guess you could quibble with Derrick Henry not being on the field, but it's not like there was a run fake involving the back next to Lamar out of that shotgun formation. So, you're kind of eliminating everyone on the right side of the field with that play. And it doesn't matter really if you fake it to Derrick Henry or not. It's not like, the edge defender who blew up that play was going to defend it any differently if Derrick Henry is on the field as opposed to Justice Hill. Maybe that's me being a little too reactive and not really seeing the play for what it could have been, but I don't know. Derrick Henry was fine with it. He didn't seem aggrieved at all by the decision not to have him in on either the first play, which looked like it might have been a pop pass, which could have been a fun
Yeah.
Tebow-esque wrinkle, or the second, which obviously was stopped well short of a line.
Yeah, I mean this game ultimately came down to that play, but the Ravens lost it with the poor play that they put up all afternoon. 12 penalties. By my count, 6 of those were on offense, 2 on special teams, and 4 on the defense. And it could have been worse because 3 of those ended up not counting. 2 were offsetting penalties and on sportsmanlike conduct. There was a lot of bad blood between these two teams. It's very clear that the rivalry is not fabricated by the media. It's not a media invention.
Alive and well.
It is alive and well between these two teams, even though a lot of the players on the Ravens did not take the bait this week when talking to the media about these two teams, especially Lamar Jackson. It's clear that they don't like each other. So there were unsportsmanlike conduct penalties that were offset, and there was one declined penalty, but it was holding on Ronnie Stanley, illegal shift by Rashad Bateman that was declined, holding on Patrick McCary, 2 Patrick McCary ineligible man downfield penalties, which I get. It's difficult to block for Lamar Jackson because you never know if he's going to run or if he's going to pass. Too many men on the field for the defense. Travis Jones, illegal use of hands. Nate Wiggins, defensive holding. Illegal block above the waist, Sanusi Kane. So many penalties in this game for a team that leads the league in penalties. If that doesn't fall on John Harbaugh and it doesn't fall on Todd Monken and it doesn't fall on Zach Orr, who does it fall on? Just the players not doing their jobs?
Yeah, I mean, this is not me blaming Lamar because part of what makes him so great is his improvisational skills. But you saw a couple times, and on one of these, it definitely wasn't his fault. But on one of the illegal man downfield, there's a Steelers linebacker in Lamar's throwing window as he's trying to dump off that screen, and like that, half second or full second delay probably let Patrick McCary go up, further upfield than was originally intended. And because he's not looking back at the throw, he's probably thinking this pass is already in the air. I might as well venture downfield. That was the play that led to the Derrick Henry 10-yard catch, which obviously got overturned. There was the play on the final drive, which ended up being a moot point anyway because they ended up scoring the touchdown. But when Lamar is just biding his time as he's attacking that sideline, waiting for Nelson Aguilar to go downfield, he throws it. Nelly catches it, but it's called back because I think was it McCary again who was called for being
yes.
illegally downfield.
Yes.
Tyler Linderbaum after that play was very upset with someone, and it looked like it might have been Lamar because he yelled in the direction of Lamar, who was on the same side relative to Tyler as the sideline. Maybe there was a ref nearby that I missed. That was within the kind of vision cone of Tyler. But I imagine that there was some frustration with just like taking a little bit too long to get rid of the ball on these plays where you're expecting it to be timing based and you need to get rid of the ball by a certain point because it's just that is the expectation. But just from a bigger picture standpoint, this team is 7-4, and you look, we talked about this after that Cowboys game, which until today felt like the low water mark for any team penalty wise in a game. Offensive penalty EPA minus 14 points. So the Ravens have cost themselves over 2 touchdowns worth of points by EPA. Defensive penalties negative 8.59. So again, well over a touchdown. And then you compound that with the guy we should probably be talking about for the next half hour, who is Justin Tucker. They lose this game by 2 points. Chris Boswell is out there anointing himself, not through words, but with his actions as the best kicker in the NFL, while Justin Tucker is continuing to miss kick after kick to the left side of the goalposts. And the Ravens sure could have used just one of those, one. And maybe we're talking about the Ravens being the clear favorite in this AFC North race.
Ravens lost by 2. Justin Tucker missed 2 field goals, 47 yards and 50 yards. He did make a 57-yarder later in the game that ended up
54, I think.
54 that ended up saving him from being the dominant storyline of this podcast. But you wonder how you lose a game where you don't allow a touchdown and you yourself score 2 touchdowns. And this is how you do it. I mean, we'll talk about Justin Tucker in just a bit, but offensively, this was, I think, easily the worst game of the season. for this offense. Lamar Jackson had probably his worst game of the season, 16 of 33 for just 207 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown, 1 pick that I think probably goes on the receiver, not on the passer in that. 4 carries for 46 yards. He started this game 4 of 12, which is the complete opposite of what we've seen from him this season and last, which is he usually starts the game with a very high completion percentage, starts 8 of 8, 7 of 8, something like that. And he was 8 of 18 in the first half. He was not completing balls downfield. It just felt like this whole offense, Derrick Henry included, at least to start the game, was so out of sync. And it wasn't until later in the game, it wasn't until the second half that they were finally able to pull themselves out of the doldrums for an offense that I think is still the best in the league. Whatever it is that Mike Tomlin, whatever kryptonite he holds on this offense and on Lamar Jackson, it's so frustrating because Steelers fans are perhaps the most annoying when it comes to discrediting Lamar Jackson's passing ability and throwing shade on him as a passer and calling him Lamar RB. And yet he plays his worst games against the Steelers. So he feeds into that by playing his worst offensive games against the Steelers because he was inaccurate downfield. He used his legs a fair amount, which was made them respect it, but he was not as sharp today through the air as we've seen him be all season.
Yeah. You look at some of the next gen stats stuff. He finished under 50% completion percentage, but even his expected completion percentage, which again accounts for, when the ball is thrown down distance, where the X's and O's are on the football field while the play is ongoing, only 62.2%. So it's not great that he was basically 14 percentage points under expectation relative to the tracking model. But if you couldn't, design up better looks for this passing offense than 62.2% based on everything that was going on, then that suggests that something bigger was at play. And that was, I think, the Ravens' inability, as John Harbaugh said. He was asked post-game what he felt like the biggest issue for this defense was, and he felt like there were too many second and longs. And there were too many second and longs because the Ravens were either getting bothered on first down on dropbacks, or they just cannot set the line of scrimmage for Derrick Henry on handoffs.
Or they were committing a penalty on first down.
Or they were committing a penalty. The only real recourse that the Ravens had run game wise today, I think, was those read options. Otherwise, you take out that nice, kind of audible to play by Lamar, where he hands it off to Derrick Henry on a kind of lightly attended to left side for the Steelers. I think in that second quarter, this Ravens run game really did nothing. Obviously Derrick Henry plunged it in for a nice carry worth $500,000 with him getting to 15 total touchdowns. But again, it happened against the Bengals. It happened against the Steelers. They just are not getting the 4, 5, 6 yard gains that even the Steelers were getting today. Obviously I think the Ravens run defense overall should be proud of how they played, considering just how often they were playing without a safety in the box. But there were times, especially after Roquan left, where it felt like the Steelers were able to stay ahead of the chains with 5 yard gain, 6 yard gain. And that type of result rarely felt available to the Ravens.
Why do you think that is? Is it the offensive line who made their fair share of mistakes in this game? Is it the play calling? Is it not sticking to the run enough? Derrick Henry had just 13 carries in this game for 65 yards. And it's not like they were lighting it up through the air. Should they have stuck more to the run? Were the play calling bad? Was there just not enough blocking in front of him? What was the cause of it?
I'd have to go back and look at the tape, not to sound too much like John Harbaugh.
Exactly like John. Yeah.
This is. I think we should give credit where credit is due and say this is a really, 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 really good Steelers defensive line.
No, it is.
PFF had them. PFF had them number 1 in the NFL, and obviously you had PQ playing with something to prove today, and he did. And it wasn't in run defense, but Peyton Wilson makes that incredible interception on Justice Hill, which might have been low key the play of the day, because if the Ravens even finish with a field goal on that drive, then all the pressure in the world is on the Steelers to go march downfield. After that hypothetical Ravens touchdown drive on their final possession of the game. So, obviously Tyler Linderbaum is an all-world type. Ronnie Stanley is a good run blocker. I think Roger Rosengarten has held his own for the most part, but I guess it just comes down to are you getting enough push, or are you getting enough movement from Patrick McCary on those zone blocks that we so often saw today? Are you getting enough movement from Ben Lafayette today? I mean, the offensive line just in general, I think had a kind of suboptimal game. Just looking at some of the stats, I think Steelers were credited with like a 41 or 42% pressure rate, which is like right with their average against the Ravens in all these games that they've given them trouble with. I don't know how much of that were quick pressures where you can't really pin the blame on Lamar, and how many of those were, longer developing plays where Lamar just couldn't find anyone open or no one was getting open for him. But that's been the template for Pittsburgh. Just get close enough to Lamar to either get a hand in his face to disrupt his vision or knock down the passes, which they did a couple times today, or maybe just downright sack him. It's rare that Lamar's been sacked multiple times in a game today, or it's been sacked multiple times in a game. And today he was sacked. What was it twice? Yeah, twice for 2 yards, but that's still atypical for him.
Yeah, and it doesn't get a whole lot easier. I mean, there was a time where it looked like Derrick Henry was on pace to reach 2,000 yards for the second time in his career, and the last couple of weeks the train has slowed down just a bit. That would have been a ridiculous total. Don't want to say that it would be a disappointment if he doesn't reach 2,000 yards. That's an absurd total. But the run game has slowed down just a little bit, and it's not like it's going to get a whole lot easier because they play the Steelers again in 5 weeks. Next up is the Chargers, who are top 10 in rushing defense, the Eagles, who are top 10 in rushing defense. So there are going to be some tough games on their schedule where they're going to have to prove that they can still run the ball effectively, and that'll open up the passing game, you hope. We should give credit to this defense because this was, even though they allowed 10 points to the Buffalo Bills, that was before the Bills kind of went into their supernova era, and they've been really good the last several weeks. I think from my perspective, this was the best the defense played all season because the offense wasn't there to back them up. In that Bills game, the offense kept scoring. They scored 41 points, and the Bills had so much pressure on them to come down the field to score touchdowns. In this game, all the pressure was on the Ravens defense because the offense could do nothing. They were stuck in this bog offense, and it was all on the defense to time and time again get stops. We knew coming into this game that the Steelers were not a good red zone offense, but give credit to the Ravens defense for thwarting them in the red zone time and time again, not allowing a touchdown, and taking away what had been the Steelers' best item in their playbook since Russell Wilson took over, which is the moon ball. Only one moon ball in this game that I could count to George Pickens in this game. They did not play Marcus Williams in this game. Eddie Jackson did not make this trip. He was held out for non-football reasons. They went with Ardarius Washington. They played Tre'Davious White. They are throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. And today, it stuck more than it ever has. Is this a rare flash in the pan for this defense, or have they maybe figured out a formula going forward?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on the health of some of the guys that left today. Roquan Smith, I didn't see him in the locker room. He was ruled out with a hamstring. Didn't get any injury updates from John Harbaugh and anyone. Kyle Hamilton, was, I guess, trying to grit it out toward the end of that game. Looked like he was dealing with a decently painful limp. He's obviously been through the ringer the past week and a half with the ankle injury, and then has the possible stinger today that sidelines him for concussion evaluation. But he goes back in there, and I guess he had a lower leg situation late in this game on that final drive, I guess it looked like. So if you take those two guys out of the mix, it feels like it becomes a bit of a Jenga tower. And the last thing this Ravens defense needs is to be even more unstable. But I think they did structurally what they had to. We mentioned it at the top. They were able to stop the run for the most part. Pittsburgh finished 34 carries, 122 yards, 3.6 yards per carry without really throwing a whole lot of bodies at the problem. And because of that, they were able to, have that shell coverage in the back end, have a safety on one side of the field, have a safety on the other side of the field, and just discourage Russell Wilson from having those very, very tempting looks to George Pickens or Mike Williams, who didn't even have a catch today. I don't know how much he played, but completely shut out today. So if you can get away with that because your pass rush is turned up, and the Ravens pass rush was again impressive today. Career high 2.5 sacks. I think they downgraded Adafe from 3 to 2.5, but still, I think he that matches a career high, and I think he's at a career high for total sacks this season. But yeah, I mean, I don't think the Chargers offense that they are going to see next Monday is noticeably, appreciably better than this Steelers offense. But then you talk about the game after that, where it's the Eagles, and it's a really good offensive line, a potential MVP dark horse in Saquon Barkley, an elite wide receiver duo in AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, a nice tight end in Dallas Goedert. You better hope that this is a building block and not just an illusion, because if this offense, was found out at all today, then the Chargers are going to find them out, next week. And the defense for the Eagles, which has really turned a corner of late, is going to find them out the week after that.
Yeah, you can't overstate the absence of Roquan Smith when he left this game with that hamstring injury, because immediately after he comes out, Russell Wilson throws right over the top of Malik Harrison for a big completion right over the middle. So they clearly were targeting. And for even as, not up to his standards as Roquan Smith has played this season, he still is a whole lot better than the alternative. And you still want to have him out there. And he is still good at coming downhill and stopping the run. As slow as he has looked, as shaky as he has looked in pass coverage, you still want him being able to clog up the middle there. So you need to have him in there. Kyle Hamilton, that stinger that he suffered, it was on a massive third down stop where he stops Russell Wilson from picking up the first down on a one-on-one tackle. He was all over the field today. He was making great plays when he was on the field. And when he wasn't on the sideline, he looked terrific. He looked like the Kyle Hamilton that we expected to be another all-pro season. And you also saw the new guys step up. Tre'Davious White with a couple of PBUs in this game. Is he going to get more playing time? Should he get more playing time than Brandon Stevens, who struggled at times? That one moon ball to George Pickens was over Brandon Stevens. And there was one play in the first quarter where I thought that Brandon Stevens got his mitts on a ball and was able to knock it free of George Pickens. Turns out it just bounced off his hands. Should Brandon Stevens be getting less playing time than Tre'Davious White, for whom the Ravens traded a 7th rounder a few weeks ago?
I think I'll answer by saying that I think they are playing him less at outside cornerback. That's for sure. It would surprise me if they took him off the field at any point in this one, because it seemed, again, this is just kind of initial viewing, was like when it was an obvious passing down and the Steelers were flooding the field with wide receivers, then they would move Brandon Stevens inside because they obviously couldn't put Kyle Hamilton there, and maybe they already had Marlon Humphrey on the field. And so maybe the dime package for the Ravens was just to have Tre'Davious White be that outside cornerback because they don't trust Brandon Stevens there. And obviously they couldn't move Ardarius Washington into the slot because Marcus Williams was benched, because Eddie Jackson didn't make the trip. So I guess that's, there's not really a preseason at this point for Trey White where they can see what works for him, see what works for Brandon Stevens. So, just diving headfirst into this possibility. And as you said, it worked for the Ravens. Brandon Stevens, I think, had a good game, even though that missed tackle on George Pickens was not a good look. I think he missed another tackle in the open field in the first quarter. It's been a struggle for him tackling, I think, which has been pretty surprising considering he was just so well coached, it seemed like, last year. But if that's what it takes to fix this defense for even a game, then that's what you've got to do. I guess the Ravens don't really have to worry about someone as good as George Pickens next week, but still every team on this roster every team on the schedule is going to have a number one wide receiver, and the Ravens have been the worst team in the league at defending number one wide receivers. So it's got to be an all hands on deck kind of effort today.
We've gone far too long in this podcast with actually diving into Justin Tucker's struggles today, because him missing from 47 and 50 were massive causes for concern. Remember, he missed field goals in each of the first 3 games. Then he got his crap together, and the middle of the season didn't miss for a long stretch. The last few weeks have been a struggle. He had a missed extra point. He has now missed, so far this season, 6 field goal attempts for just the third time in a season in his career. His career high is 7 in 2015, but that was when he had 40 attempts. He has had 22 attempts, I believe 22 attempts so far this season, maybe 21. He did make that long beyond 50-yarder late in the game, and credit to him for speaking after the game to the media. What did he say, and what the heck is going on with this future Hall of Famer?
I don't know. I don't know if the Ravens know. I don't know if Justin Tucker knows, and that's probably the scariest thing. It's just, it's like seeing democracy collapse before your eyes. You just this once venerated, reliable institution is no more. But enough about politics. It's, as it has been pointed out by many times, and as it will continue to be pointed out, the more he misses wide left, every single one of these misses has been wide left. At Kansas City, wide left. At Las Vegas, or versus Las Vegas, wide left. At Dallas, wide left. At Cleveland, wide left. At Pittsburgh, wide left. At Pittsburgh, wide left. And I think the extra point missed last game was also wide left, wasn't it, against the Bengals?
I don't remember off the top of my head, to be honest. There have been too many misses.
I think it might have been. He was asked today whether there were any common denominators because of the fact that they were all misses in the same form and fashion. And he said, no, not really, because each kick is its own thing. Each kick is its own kick. He said he felt like, on some of these, he feels like he's getting a good boot through the ball, and it's just not going through. I think I overheard him say that he didn't feel like there was any service problems, which has been speculated upon by a YouTuber that there is an issue with the Ravens holding and snapping operation. Obviously, the last thing that you expect from Justin Tucker, even less expected than him missing a kick from any distance, is him throwing someone under the bus. Pointing a finger of blame at them. I don't think we're never gonna get that. Justin's gonna write his memoirs, 20, 30 years from now, and is still gonna say everything was honky dory on a kick. It's just not his MO. But I mean, at a certain point, you wonder if you have to, I don't know, motivate him psychologically. I mean, like no one takes these failures more seriously than Justin, but maybe you bring in a kicker for a tryout, knowing that you're not going to sign him, just to put a little bit of fire under Justin Tucker's ass, because, or maybe at least to cover your own ass, to give, the media and the fans some sign that you are understanding of the seriousness of the situation. Because as we've talked about many times, and as we're talking about right now, all of these misses, it seems like, ultimately come back to hurt the Ravens. I mean, the most miraculous thing about that missed extra point against the Bengals was that they were able to overcome it within like a 4 or 5 minute span. They missed the extra point, get the ball back, get the 2-point conversion. Everything's back to normal.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that he needs motivation under him because of who he is as a person, who he's shown to be, which is consistent year after year, which is consistently motivated. But you may need to bring in somebody, like you said, just to cover your own butt. I mean, at what point do you not trust him? The fact that John Harbaugh trotted him out there for that final kick, there was a lot of hand wringing in that game. I'm not sure if he's ever missed 3 field goals in a game. He was on the precipice of history at that point, and he was on the precipice of tying his career high for 7 misses in a season. So you still, for all the talk of you need to keep showing confidence in him, at what point does it not matter? At what point do you need to focus on just winning ball games? It's baffling, and it's frustrating because it's the one area of the game that it's like a closer in baseball. And I saw some people make the comparison to Craig Kimbrell. It's like, at what point is it mental? At what point is it, only he knows what is going on. And it's difficult for us on the outside to speculate exactly what's happening, whether it's the hold, whether it's the snap, whether it's him just being off. Whether he, wakes up on the wrong side of the bed, and that's on the left side and not the right side, and that's why he's wide left all the time. It's impossible for us to know.
is it possible he made a Faustian bargain and asked for Texas football to be back, like fully back in the running for the college football playoff back, and maybe didn't understand the terms and conditions of that agreement and was doomed, was consigned to a season of just utter futility? Is that on the table?
I will let you ask him that during the next open locker room.
All right. I think
Just,
Justin is a God-fearing man. He probably wouldn't appreciate that question.
No. Let's take a step back and let's take a large picture view of where the Ravens stand right now, because they are a game and a half back now of the Steelers in the AFC North. They still have their bye coming up, so they have one fewer game to play than the Steelers. They're 7-4. Steelers are 8-2, and they play again in 5 weeks. Ravens' remaining schedule is at LA, home against the Eagles, at the Giants. They meet the Steelers 5 weeks from now at home, at the Houston Texans, and home against the Cleveland Browns. Pittsburgh's remaining 7 games: at Cleveland, at Cincinnati, home against Cleveland. They have so many divisional games left. At the Eagles, they meet in 5 weeks against the Ravens, at home against Kansas City, and at home against the Bengals. Is this division wrapped up? Is it possible for the Ravens to come back into this division? And what needs to happen over the next 7 weeks for them to get back into this thing?
Yeah, I mean, the Steelers are obviously favorites in this division, but looking at the well, not the updated, but the New York Times playoff calculator, with this win today, Steelers have a 51% chance to win the division. I think the Ravens are at about 45%, which means that, you know, there's a small but rather statistically insignificant chance that the Bengals could also come back and wrap this thing up. I guess the one thing that you can say about this season being what it is and how it's ordered and how it's gone so far for the Ravens is that, knock on wood, if, you know, assuming Lamar doesn't get hurt, there's basically no chance that he misses that next game against the Steelers, because everything will be on the line, and it won't be like all the other games that he's missed because either of injury or because the Ravens just haven't needed him and it's been the regular season finale. So yeah, I mean, this is a flawed Steelers team, great defense, obviously, but still, I think we saw some of the limitations of their offense. I mean, they won today, averaging, I believe, 4.1 yards per carry, and Russ just making a couple boneheaded throws. I mean, just that interception to Marlon in the end zone was just completely inexcusable. He again showed very little pocket presence today, just taking sack after sack, scrambling into pressure. You know, he didn't really make a whole lot of stuff happen with his legs. The running backs were fine, but not a whole lot of juice besides George Pickens and that receiving core. And I think it's probably, I'm going to need to see more than one game of Mike Williams, you know, cooking a Commanders DB to believe that this offense has a legit, you know, two-headed monster in the receiving core.
Yeah, it still feels like this Steelers team has a ceiling, and that ceiling is not as high as the Ravens ceiling, because that offense can go, you know, off at any point. And the Ravens offense didn't do it today, but, you know, they have shown all season that they are one of the best, if not the best, in the NFL. And it's just a matter of getting that defense.
Third in special teams DVOA. Ravens entered today 19th, and I think you saw that play out in gross detail today.
Yeah, that's true. So while they have the advantage in special teams and defense, the Ravens offense is just undeniable, and that's why I think that they still are more poised to make a run. And yeah, Russell Wilson was not particularly impressive by any stretch in this game, aside from that interception in the back of the end zone to Marlon Humphrey, who must have put stickum on his gloves this season, because he's been catching everything. But I mean, Odafe Owe, credit to him for getting those sacks, and he could have had another. I think he would have had 3.5 in this game had it not been one of his not been wiped out by a Nate Wiggins holding penalty. But yeah. I mean, nobody loves to run into sacks more than Russell Wilson. I mean, he was just running out of clean pockets. He was just so unaware of who was around him at any point. So I'm still not particularly impressed.
Yeah. This is kind of a weird pivot, but I wanted to bring it up because I don't know when we'll get the chance to talk about it. But with the Ravens having 4 losses and, you know, Chiefs Bills happening right now. Let's see what the score is on that. So Bills up 16-14. That could be a game where if either of those two quarterbacks go supernova or leads a late drive because of how quickly narratives in the NFL can change. With this being Lamar's worst game of the season by far,
about this.
With the Ravens losing, I got curious just as we were about to hop on, Paul, and looked at like how many losses a team has suffered in an MVP winning season. You have to go back to, I think, like the Matty Ice Atlanta Falcons year to find a team that lost lost 5 games and had their player still win MVP. If you spin it further back, you have like I think the 2010 Minnesota Vikings, which was the Adrian Peterson year, which was like obviously probably the last and maybe the last for a good long while MVP winning season by a running back. But his stats that year were kind of undeniable, and they won. He won an MVP with the Vikings going just 10-6. But for the most part, you look at what it takes to be an MVP worthy candidate, and 80% of it is production, but you also need that 20% of window dressing. And right now, with the Ravens being already a 4-loss team and having a couple more toss-ups on the schedule, Lamar could end up with an even better season than he did in 2019 and still just be kind of elbowed out because voters are either going to have a little bit of fatigue with him having won last year, or they're just going to be unwilling to overlook the flaws of the defense and the special teams and say, look at Josh Allen. He's on a, 3-loss team, or look at Patrick Mahomes. He's, operating this offense that always stays on schedule, has an incredible success rate, and they haven't lost a game this season. Or, look at Saquon Barkley. He's on pace for 2,000 rushing yards, blah, blah, blah. So it's obviously it's not the most significant development from this game, but I do think it is, especially with me ostensibly not caring about MVP stuff, wink, wink. But it is kind of interesting just as we sort through the wreckage of what this game could mean for the wider scope of this season.
Yeah, since when do you care about MVP in the middle of the season, Jonas? You're usually the guy that's saying it's way too early. But, I mean, it's also recency bias, too, that factors into this. Because what did Lamar do to win the MVP last season? He just outlasted everybody. He was not the favorite from start to finish. He was not even the midseason favorite. He just played better as the season wore along while other guys were falling off. I still don't think. I mean, this is by far Lamar's worst game of the season. In my mind, watching him up close every week, I still think he's the MVP. His stats are not even comparable to Patrick Mahomes. I think maybe Josh Allen might have a stronger case, but they came into this Sunday with Lamar has twice as many passing touchdowns and only 2 interceptions coming into this day than Patrick Mahomes.
And let's review those 3 interceptions. One was off Rashad Bateman's hands.
Yep.
One was off Mark Andrews' hands, and the third off Justice Hill's hands. So with a little bit more puck luck, as they say in hockey, he could be throwing a shutout right now. But alas, here the Ravens are with 4 losses to their name.
Even if he finishes with like 5 interceptions, that's still just an absurd season. All right, Jonas, we should read out a review that we got because we promised that we'd read out reviews on the Banner Ravens podcast. If you write us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast of the Banner Ravens podcast, I'll read it out. And I got one earlier this week about Roquan Smith. There was a misspelling in Roquan, but I'm going to go ahead and let that slide. Ovrob Brizzy, sure, says Roquan elevated Patrick, as in Patrick Queen, but Patrick Queen complimented Roquan. Who is this year's Patrick? No one. It sounded like a haiku. It does rhyme. Patrick Queen in this game, by the way, finished with a team-high 10 tackles. He had that massive forced fumble and fumble recovery of Isaiah Likely that allowed Pittsburgh to kick a field goal near the end of the first half. So if it wasn't for that turnover and field goal, the Ravens would have outscored the Steelers in this game. He did get his revenge over this Ravens team. And these two, we talked about coming into this week, Roquan Smith, Patrick Queen, they made each other better. They both benefited from this partnership. And Trenton Simpson is coming along okay as a second-year player, but should the Ravens have tried to get a little bit more of a veteran presence at that second linebacker spot, or should they have, I don't know, approached this position differently?
I think they liked what they have in Trenton Simpson. I think they still like what they have in Trenton Simpson, but it's notable that PQ was an every down linebacker, and the Ravens were taking Trent Simpson off the field on some obvious passing downs to put in Chris Board. That's the unkind learning curve for some of these linebackers. It's very tough to come in and be an immediate success, even if you're playing next to Roquan Smith, even if you're playing behind a really, really, really good defensive line. So
yeah,
the Ravens just have to have average play at that linebacker spot next to Roquan Smith. I think Trenton Simpson has been better than average, but they needed, they would have loved to not have Patrick Queen on the field today. They would have loved to have Deshaun Elliott not on the field today, because he was the one who scooped up that first fumble by Derrick Henry. So it was not this is not a game where I envy the mentions of Lacey DaCosta, because there will be a lot of very mad Ravens fans tweeting at her about why her husband completely reasonably signed or didn't sign certain people this offseason.
And it was not a great return to Pittsburgh for Deontay Johnson, who did not finish with a catch, who was targeted twice in this game. And Charles Davis on the CBS broadcast pointing out when there was that overthrow along the sideline where Deontay Johnson could have caught a pass right near the goal line in the first half, that maybe Deontay Johnson should have carved out a little bit more space for himself along that sideline so that Lamar didn't have to fit it in a 2x2 window. And that's kind of the book on Deontay Johnson right now, who has one catch so far in his Ravens career, a game where they could have used him. They went into that final drive, by the way, with only 2 receptions, 2 wide receivers. It wasn't until that final drive that the wide receivers really got cooking. Isn't that crazy? 1 to Rashad Bateman, 1 to Zay Flowers before the Ravens' final offensive drive. Just wild.
Not great. I mean,
yeah,
just none of these stats make sense. I'm surprised that they average over 6 yards per play, considering just how putrid they looked for so much of this game.
Did they convert a single third down in this game? I mean, they went 4 for 11, and the Steelers went 4 for 16. Ugly. I think at halftime the two teams were combined 1 for 14 on third down.
Make it stop.
Gross.
Make it stop.
All right. At Jonas_Shaffer is his Twitter handle. I'm at Paul Mancano and at All Banner Sports. And I've made a blue sky. I'm waiting for Jonas to make his as well. We've made a blue sky for our Baltimore Banner Sports account as well. So go ahead and follow us over there if you've jumped ship. And of course, subscribe to the Baltimore Banner. $1 for 6 months to read all of Jonas's great work. Gianna Hahn, Kyle Goon, all of them are in Pittsburgh, and we'll have full reactions to this. We will be back on Thursday to preview the Hardball, the game between these two brothers. We will be back Thursday for that preview. In the meantime, thanks so much for tuning in. For Jonas Shaffer, I'm Paul Mancano.